Welcome again to Joe Stunner Boxing. I hope you're all well. I watched a couple of videos on the Boxing News channel, Boxing News, the trade paper. They've got a YouTube channel like everyone else. One of the interviews was with Shane McGuigan and the other was with Chris Billam-Smith. And as you probably know, Billam-Smith's last fight was against Lawrence Okolie. He won a majority decision, which should have been unanimous. God knows what the other guy was watching, the one who scored it 112, but anyway, the right man won. And Okolie looked absolutely appalling. It was a sort of car crash of a fight. Okolie lost his WBO cruiserweight title. He was floored 3 times. You can make an argument that one, maybe even 2 of those shouldn't have stood, but he was ragged and floundering with no apparent game plan, and Billam-Smith beat him. I mean, Billam-Smith had moments where he had to ride out a bit of a storm because Okolie would come on strong, but they were only bursts. Billam-Smith deserved to win that fight. And Okolie, who's now had 2 fights on Sky, he signed to Boxer, having left Matchroom under a bit of a cloud. Lots of toing and froing and threats of legal action. He's had 2 fights. The first one was against David Light, who was injured in the fight. I hope David Light is doing okay. He did suffer a brain injury. But Lawrence looked terrible in that as well, and he got a point deducted. I think it was in the 11th round for holding. So, you know, Okolie is... People have talked about Ben Shalom and Sky and Boxer, and Ben Shalom has not given the impression that he is always making the right decisions. Let's be kind and put it that way. I mean, there were the 2 incidents with the pulling fighters out of purse bids. Fraser Clark hasn't looked very good, to be honest with you. Has looked domestic level, and that's about it. Has been matched. I mean, Dave Allen was the last fight. That's what that was all about. Yeah, he just hasn't been... He just hasn't looked good. And yet, Boxer paid a lot of money for him, and they've paid a lot of money for Okolie. Ben Shalom said Okolie was going to be the face of British boxing or something along those lines. Doesn't look like it, does it? But after the defeat to Billam-Smith, Okolie activated the rematch clause. But there is some doubt as to whether that fight will happen, at least if what Chris Billam-Smith and Shane McGuigan were alluding to, because it was very interesting to read between the lines in those 2 interviews. In fact, you didn't really need to read between the lines with Billam-Smith, because he kind of said it outright. When he was being asked about the rematch, he said, well, it's down to the broadcasters. We're training for that fight, for the rematch, but it's down to the broadcasters because boxing is entertainment, and Lawrence's last few performances have not been entertaining. Well, that implies that Sky are looking for an alternative, and the alternative as it stands, according to both Lawrence and Shane McGuigan, is Mateusz Masternak as a first defence. Now, we know that Billam-Smith sells a lot of tickets in Bournemouth. If Okolie is to be the opponent and have the rematch, then I would imagine in Bournemouth people would turn up to watch Chris defend his title. But after the first fight, that bizarre, ramshackle... I don't even know how to describe it. Just a very strange fight, but strangely absorbing because it was so bad. And things were happening. You know, Chris was flooring Lawrence, and it was just a strange fight. But would people, as far as viewing figures go, would they watch it? Unless you're someone like me who likes who's a bit of a boxing junkie and likes strange fights. I think most people would say, oh, did you see the first fight? That was awful. And wasn't Okolie boring against David Light? No, I'm not watching that. So I think Sky are very, very reluctant to put Okolie in a main event again. And probably what he might have to do is, go away and have a 10-round undercard fight and show that he can actually entertain. But this isn't the first time, of course, that Okolie has frustrated audiences, shall we say, and promoters, because when he was with Matchroom, I mean, he had some absolute stinker fights. I mean, really, really awful. you know, the Matty Askin fight, which was for the British title, was boring as hell and a sort of clutch fest. And Isaac Chamberlain, I mean, that wasn't a great fight. That was between two undefeated fighters, and it was a main event, but very early on in their career. But that was a boring fight as well. I mean, Chamberlain was on the floor a couple of times in the first and the sixth, I think it was. But at the same time, it wasn't an exciting fight, and yet, you know, Okolie has looked in some fights pretty explosive. I watched him. I sat ringside when he beat Luke Watkins, and Watkins at the time was the Commonwealth champion and undefeated. And Okolie looked really good. He looked like he meant business. And Okolie against Wadi Camacho, it wasn't a bad performance. You know, Wadi was always sort of area level, British level. I think he held a Commonwealth title as well. But Lawrence got the work done, and then against Krzysztof Glowacki, he looked very, very good. And he was with Shane McGuigan, ironically, who was his trainer. Now he's with Sugar Hill. And I think there are two points to make here. I think one is that Lawrence must be thinking, he must at least cross his mind, maybe I should have stayed with Matchroom, because Eddie Hearn invested a lot of money in him. And even though he was boring at times and gave poor performances, Hearn stuck with him. And yet Okolie was quite insulting when he left Matchroom. You know, accusations of slave ownership and all this sort of melodramatic nonsense. Burnt his bridges with Matchroom, that's for sure. Moved over to Boxer. Got a new trainer. I don't know why he left McGuigan, because him and McGuigan seemed to be gelling very, very well, although their final fight was boring, was actually quite boring. Against Saislak, is that the name? Michel Saislak, and that was unanimous 12-round decision, but it was boring as hell. But on the flip side of this, of course, is that Sky and Shalom, certainly Sky, the executives at Sky must be thinking, you know, you spent a ton of money on this guy. He's boring as hell. What did you spend money on him for? And I think a lot of people have said, and I tend to think this is a reasonable gamble, a reasonable bet, that Sky and Shalom won't be together when the contract finishes. I don't know how long their contract is, but will it be renewed? I have very serious doubts, because I think Shalom has spent a lot of money at Sky and they're not getting value for money. And this is where Adam Smith comes in, because Adam Smith, who disappeared, walked off into the sunset, I've heard he's actually quite ill, seriously ill, in which case, I'm not someone who's going to make fun of someone who's ill. You know, get out of that. I'm not interested. If he is ill, you know, good luck to the guy, all the best wishes and everything. But while he was there, Adam Smith, with all that experience, 30 years of experience of working in boxing broadcasting, he would have balanced it out with you would hope, with Shalom, who is wet behind the ears, very green. Is he even 30 years old, Shalom? He might have just turned 30. But I did hear from people in the know, one of them who works for Sky, that there was definite friction between Shalom and Adam Smith about the way in which Sky boxing should be brought forward. And I think Adam Smith's experience is missing at Sky now, very much missing. And Shalom has not covered himself in glory. There have been one or two good nights, but I mean, lucrative nights. You know, Kilbrook and Amir Khan, which was way past its sell-by date. That was a financial success, and a few others. But are they getting the figures they want? Are they getting the value for money? I don't think so. And I think Lawrence Okolie is actually the poster boy for not getting value for money. Joshua Buatsi, he hasn't looked great recently since he left Matchroom. But we'll see. But don't be surprised if the rematch between Billam-Smith and Okolie doesn't happen. I'm not sure Sky want to put that on. They want. I think they're after Okolie to drop down to a supporting, like a chief support, and show that he's got some financial worth, that he can pull viewing figures, that he can pull viewers in. Because at the moment it looks pretty grim, and I think he's made some bad decisions in his career, very bad decisions. And now he hasn't got a belt. When he had a belt, he had a bargaining chip, but not anymore. So yeah, just a few thoughts on Lawrence Okolie. Leave your comments below. Tell me what you think. Do you agree with with what I'm saying or not. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. Thank you for your time as always. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and hit the like button, and we will chat again soon. Spread the word about Joe Stunner Boxing. Bye for now.